In every war, there exist unspoken truths, stories whispered only among the men who face death directly. These accounts rarely make it into military reports, but every pilot who has survived a genuine dogfight knows them by heart. For the German Luftwaffe during World War II, one of these whispered realities concerned an unexpected adversary, the Canadian fighter pilot. They were few in number. They did not field the massive formations of the Americans, nor did they carry the long-standing prestige of Britain's Royal Air Force. Yet, in the fiercest skies of the conflict, where survival was measured hour by hour, German pilots began to recognize that this small group inflicted damage far out of proportion to its size, and almost every encounter with them ended disastrously for the Luftwaffe. This fact never appeared in German newspapers or propaganda broadcasts, but within frontline squadrons, in grim debriefings after losing another aircraft or during prisoner interrogations, a phrase began surfacing with increasing frequency: it was the Canadians. They did not use the term merely to indicate nationality, they used it to describe a type of adversary: fast, precise, cold-blooded, and astonishingly fearless. The moment a squadron discovered their opponent was Canadian, the atmosphere grew heavy with tension. One Luftwaffe officer wrote in his diary, "If the enemy are Canadians, expect trouble. They attack differently." But what did differently truly mean? To understand the fear, one must look deeper into the nature of the wartime RCAF, the Royal Canadian Air Force. Canada did not enter the war seeking fame or glory. There were no promises of prestige, no territorial ambitions. Most Canadian pilots were hunters, lumberjacks, miners, mechanics, men raised in a vast and unforgiving land where self-reliance was a way of life. When trained to fly, all of these traits, sharp reflexes, cold weather resilience, natural marksmanship, transformed into lethal instincts in the air. What unnerved the Germans was not the sheer number of pilots, but the extraordinary kill ratios they achieved. Luftwaffe pilots whispered about names like George "Buzz" Burling, a Canadian ace who once downed 3 aircraft in just 14 seconds. In the Ardennes, a Canadian Spitfire squadron ambushed 15 German planes in minutes without losing a single aircraft. By 1945, over Germany, Tempests and Spitfires bearing the maple leaf were so effective that even pilots of the advanced Me-262 jets treated them with caution. Another distinguishing factor was that Canadian pilots always appeared where the fighting was fiercest. Malta, the most brutal aerial battlefield of the Mediterranean; Normandy, skies filled with flak and chaos; the Ardennes, where the weather was deadly and the combat desperate; and Germany in 1945, where the Luftwaffe, cornered and exhausted, fought with nothing left to lose. German records consistently reflected the same pattern: Canadian pilots attacked faster, deeper, and with greater willingness to take risks than any other Allied force. Their fearlessness was not recklessness, but a philosophy: attack first, strike hard, and follow through relentlessly. Even the RAF acknowledged that when a mission required smashing a German formation or diving into near-suicidal conditions, the task was often assigned to squadrons manned by Canadians. To understand this combat effectiveness, one must examine the origins of their combat DNA, the training systems, upbringing, and warrior mindset that forged these men into a small but formidable force. Many assume Canadian pilots possessed some hidden tactic or secret advantage, but the truth runs deeper. It began with how they were raised in a country shaped by vast wilderness and harsh conditions, long before they ever touched a cockpit. Unlike Europe's densely populated nations, Canada was enormous, wild, and unforgiving. Most young Canadian men who enlisted grew up enduring brutal winters, dense forests, and remote wildernesses, hunting, trapping, and mastering survival skills. Physical labor on farms, mines, and lumber camps, coupled with long distances requiring self-reliance, honed survival instincts, reflexes, and exceptional marksmanship, all critical skills for life-or-death dogfighting. One RAF instructor noted after the war, "A Canadian doesn't learn to shoot, he grows up with it." To the Luftwaffe, the surprise was unmistakable: Canadian pilots shot differently. They did not spray and pray like inexperienced Americans, nor were they overly cautious like many British pilots. Their bursts were fewer but deadly, each aimed with intent, instinct, and the cold precision of a hunter. German aces like Steinhoff later described Canadian firing as extraordinarily accurate. Second, the British Commonwealth Air Training Plan, or CAT, was the largest pilot training system in the world. Running from 1939 to 1945, it turned Canada into a massive production line for fighter pilots, navigators, airgunners, radio operators, and technical crews. The RAF openly acknowledged, without Canada, the RAF cannot survive. CAP's success stemmed from wide, uncluttered skies, harsh training standards, RAF-level tactical instruction, early emphasis on deflection shooting and dive attacks, and brutal selection. Only 20% of trainees became fighter pilots. The result, Maple Leaf pilots entered combat highly skilled from day one. Luftwaffe reports frequently noted, the Canadians are not rookies. Their first mission feels like their 10th. Third, and most feared, was the attack to the end spirit. If one trait defines Canadian fighter pilots, it is their combat mindset. Canadian squadrons became synonymous with fearless close-range attacks, often diving to knife-range distances where a single mistake meant instant death. Burling once downed a plane from just 50 meters, always striking first. RCAF pilots often initiated attacks before the enemy even noticed them, contrasting sharply with British pilots, who typically awaited controller instructions. In Normandy, the Ardennes, or the push into Germany, Canadian squadrons completed missions despite poor weather, heavy flak, scattered formations, and high casualties. Captured German officers noted, they didn't break off the attack. They kept coming. This relentless aggression created a profound psychological burden, forcing the Luftwaffe into a defensive posture. Finally, Canadian pilots were disciplined yet unusually independent, combining lethal precision with a willingness to improvise under pressure. This combination of upbringing, training, philosophy, and sheer combat courage created a small but terrifying force whose impact belied its size and left the Luftwaffe wary, astonished, and often defeated. On paper, Canadian pilots followed RAF procedures, but in the air, many fought with a rough, instinctive style. If an order didn't make sense, they ignored it. If there was a chance to take down an enemy, they pursued relentlessly, even past sector boundaries. If a fellow pilot was in danger, they broke formation instantly to protect him. This wasn't insubordination. It was the survival logic of men raised in the wilderness. They trusted their instincts more than a radio transmission. One Canadian pilot summed it up. Orders matter. Survival matters more. When you combine a harsh upbringing, innate marksmanship, the world's largest and toughest training program, an aggressive initiative-driven mindset, refusal to quit, instinctive, decisive combat behavior, you understand why Luftwaffe pilots describe Canadians as different, not just better trained, but inherently more dangerous. This difference formed the psychological shadow the RCAF cast across the skies of World War II. If there was one battlefield where the Canadians became a true nightmare for the Luftwaffe, it was the tiny sun-scorched island of Malta, a speck of land in the Mediterranean that became the most fiercely contested piece of airspace in World War II. Here, in a sky filled with dust, heat haze, and the roar of engines, the Luftwaffe discovered a new kind of enemy, a lone Canadian who seemed to defy every rule of aerial combat. His name was George Buzz Burling. To the Allies, he would become the Falcon of Malta. To the Germans and Italians, he became something worse. A hunter who never missed. One Malta, the island that refused to die. Before we talk about Burling, we must understand the battlefield he stepped into. Malta in 1942 was the most bombed place on Earth. Axis forces attacked it daily because the island threatened their supply lines to North Africa. If Malta fell, Ramel would be reinforced. The North African campaign might last longer and the Mediterranean would tilt in Germany's favor. But it didn't fall. It held on. Barely through starvation, nightly raids, and skies thick with Messer Schmitts and MCKY fighters. Only a handful of RAF pilots were left to defend it. When Burling arrived, he found a dying island and a perfect hunting ground. 2. The arrival of a different kind of pilot. Burling wasn't like other pilots. He wasn't polished. He wasn't disciplined. He broke formation, ignored orders, and openly irritated his commanders. But he had one gift, the most lethal natural marksmanship of the war. He could calculate deflection angle, bullet drop, closure speed, enemy pilot reaction time, all in a fraction of a second. Not by mathematics, but by instinct. The same instinct a hunter uses to drop a deer at full sprint. On Malta, instinct mattered more than doctrine. And in Berling, the island found its avenger. 3. The kill streak that terrified the Luftwaffe. In just 14 months, Berling achieved 27 confirmed kills, several probables, countless damaged aircraft, the highest kill-per-hour rate of any Allied fighter pilot. His most legendary moment happened during a single chaotic dogfight when he shot down 3 aircraft in 14 seconds. No pilot, German, Italian, American, British, had done anything like it. A German pilot captured later was asked what happened over Malta. He didn't give a tactical answer. He whispered, "There is a Canadian over Malta who never misses." This wasn't a compliment. It was a confession of fear. 4. Why Berling's style broke the enemy's confidence. Berling fought differently. Not recklessly, but with a kind of sharpened aggression. He attacked from impossible angles. He dove steep. He climbed hard. He shot from positions other pilots wouldn't even consider. He fired ultra-short bursts. Where others sprayed bullets, Berling used 1-second bursts. Every pull of his trigger was decisive. He outthought the enemy midair. He predicted not where the enemy was, but where the enemy would be half a second later. He hunted alone. Berling often broke from formation to chase a target, infuriating his commanders, but terrifying the Luftwaffe. A solitary Spitfire diving from nowhere created panic because German pilots couldn't counter it with textbook tactics. To them, Berling was an unpredictable force of nature. 5. Malta's sky belonged to the Falcon. By late 1942, Luftwaffe units over Malta were requesting replacement crews faster than Berlin could supply them. Not because they were wiped out, but because morale collapsed. German pilots complained that the Canadians appeared from nowhere. Their shots were always perfect. Dogfights ended in seconds. Retreating wasn't safe because Berling often chased them down. Malta started as a death trap. Under Berling's wings, it became an allied fortress. His kill streak didn't just protect Malta. It psychologically crippled the Axis pilots sent to challenge him. 6. The legacy of Malta. Berling would later fight in Europe and score more victories. But Malta was where he achieved near-mythical status. To the Luftwaffe, Malta became synonymous with one thing: an invisible Canadian who could end your life before you knew he was there. In the next chapter, we will explore another moment that cemented Canada's feared reputation. A battle where Canadian Spitfires tore through a German formation so brutally that Luftwaffe analysts labeled it one of the most one-sided losses of the war. There are battles that become legends, battles that shape doctrines, and battles that shatter an enemy's confidence so brutally they enter the realm of myth. For the Luftwaffe, Mayan 1944 was that battle. It wasn't a clash of hundreds of aircraft. It wasn't a grand operation with pre-planned routes and perfect intelligence. It was a moment, a few minutes of chaos in a cold December sky where a handful of Canadian pilots unleashed one of the most devastating ambushes in the history of air combat. To the Germans, it became known as the Mayan Massacre. 1. The Winter of Desperation. Late December 1944. The Battle of the Bulge was raging in the forests of Belgium. The Luftwaffe, bleeding from years of attrition, was attempting one last desperate push to support the German armies on the ground. They sent bomber formations over the Rhine Valley, hoping to strike Allied supply lines before the front collapsed entirely. What they did not know was that a Canadian Spitfire squadron, number 401 Squadron, RCAF, was patrolling the skies near Mayen at low altitude, flying beneath the German radar net, waiting for a break in the clouds. They weren't hunting. They were simply watching, conserving fuel, scanning the horizon. Then the moment came. 2. The sun angle attack. A perfect storm. At 1,300 hours, a German formation appeared high above. A mixed group of fighters and fighter bombers heading west to strike Allied positions. The Canadians saw them first, but more importantly, the Canadians saw the sun. And the sun was behind them. To a fighter pilot, this is fate handing you the battle. The Canadian flight leader made a single call on the radio. Follow me. Dive. There was no debate, no hesitation. 16 Spitfire Mark 9 rolled over, wings slicing the air, plunging from the sun. Like hawks descending on prey. The Germans never saw them. 3. A one-sided annihilation. What happened next lasted less than 3 minutes. The first pass shredded the rear of the German formation. 3 planes fell instantly, spiraling into the hills below. The second pass caused total collapse. Canadian pilots described it later. We came in too fast for them to react. It was like they were suspended in the sky. They never fired a shot. German pilots who survived called it something else, the explosion of the sun. In total, 15 German aircraft were shot down in under 180 seconds without a single Canadian loss. This was not a dog fight. This was a surgical dismemberment of an entire formation. And it became one of the most lopsided air battles of World War II. 4. Luftwaffe reaction. Shock. Fear and a painful realization. After the war, captured German officers were questioned about Mayen. One simply said, "We never saw them. They came from the light." Another added, "Those were Canadians. They kill quickly." What shocked the Luftwaffe wasn't just the loss. It was the professionalism. The cold, controlled violence, the perfect timing, the lack of hesitation. In post-action analysis, German intelligence labeled the ambush as an example of Allied tactical superiority executed by a highly aggressive and skilled enemy unit. But the frontline pilots had a shorter summary. Those Canadians came for us. 5. Why Mayen cemented Canada's reputation. The Mayen massacre became a defining moment because it revealed 3 traits of RCAF fighter squadrons that the Luftwaffe already feared. They mastered the ambush. Canadians understood light, weather, and altitude better than most. Growing up in harsh environments taught them to read nature instinctively. They attacked with total commitment. Once engaged, they did not break off. Not until the sky was silent. They fought as hunters, not just pilots. Their approach was predatory, precise, efficient, terrifying. German air units operating near the Rhine in early 1945 began reporting an unusual pattern. Sudden Canadian attacks out of nowhere, usually from perfect angles, usually deadly. Mayen was not an anomaly. It was proof of a reality the Luftwaffe already sensed. When the Canadians showed up, something bad was about to happen. 6. The battle that broke the illusion. The Luftwaffe still had brave pilots. They still had aircraft left. But Mayen broke something more fundamental. Their belief that they could ever regain air superiority. When a small squadron can tear apart a formation with such precision, such violence, such finality, morale doesn't just drop, it shatters. And from December 1944 onward, Luftwaffe crews treated Canadian-marked Spitfires with a level of caution bordering on fear. The Messerschmitt Me-262 was supposed to be Germany's miracle. The world's first operational jet fighter, faster than anything the Allies could put into the sky, armed with 430mm cannons, capable of tearing apart bomber formations in seconds. To Hitler, it was the silver bullet. To Luftwaffe pilots, it was the last sliver of hope. And yet in the final months of the war, one group of pilots consistently managed to hunt these jets. Not avoid them, not escape them, but track them, ambush them, and shoot them down. They were flying the Hawker Tempest Mark V, one of the fastest piston engine fighters of the war, and many of the Tempest squadrons that became the Me-262's greatest threat were filled with Canadians. Number 1, the problem with hunting a jet. On paper, dogfighting a jet in a propeller-driven aircraft was suicide. The Me-262 could reach speeds of 870 km/h, nearly 200 km/h faster than the Tempest. It could climb steeper, accelerate harder, and disengage at will. No Allied pilot could chase it in level flight. And yet the Canadians found a way. They didn't chase jets, they ambushed them. Number 2, the jet's weakness, a moment of vulnerability. The Me-262 was powerful but fragile. Its Junkers Jumo 004 engines were prone to overheating, flameouts, slow throttle response, vulnerability to debris, ingestion, catastrophic failure if mishandled. Most importantly, the jet was helpless during takeoff and landing. At low speed, the Me-262 became a clumsy, heavy target, slower than a Spitfire, slower than a Tempest, and unable to accelerate for several seconds. The Canadians knew this, and they exploited it mercilessly. Number 3, the Canadian strategy, wait at the runway. In early 1945, intelligence pinpointed German jet bases along the Rhine. Rhine, Heppe, Akmer, Neuburg, Munich. Canadian-filled squadrons of the RAF 2nd Tactical Air Force began a new mission profile, anti-diver patrols. Not hunting B-1S anymore, but hunting jets. Their tactic was simple, brutal, and effective. Fly low to avoid radar. Circle near enemy airfields. Wait for Me-262S2. Return. Catch them moments before touchdown. This wasn't heroic. It was predatory and it terrified German pilots. Luftwaffe pilot Walter Schuck later said, "The Tempests were not opponents, they were hunters." 4. The kill that shocked the jet squadron. On March 25, 1945, Canadian pilot Warrant Officer B.D. Bud Smith of No. 401 Squadron spotted an Me-262 lowering its landing gear near its base. Smith dove hard, closing the distance in seconds. The jet pilot tried to accelerate, but the engines needed time. Precious seconds they didn't have. Smith fired in a short surgical burst. The 262 exploded into the ground beside the runway. This moment became legendary because it proved something the Luftwaffe did not want to admit. The world's first jet fighter could be hunted down and killed by Canadians in piston aircraft. 5. Why Tempest squadrons terrified Me-262 pilots. German reports from Jagdgeschwader 7, the main Me-262 unit, reveal a consistent pattern of fear. The Tempest was incredibly fast at low altitude. It was one of the few Allied fighters that could match the jet briefly below 5,000 foot. Tempest pilots attacked aggressively. Many were Canadians who treated the mission like a personal challenge. Tempests appeared when jets were blind. Me-262 pilots had terrible cockpit visibility during landing. The Canadians knew the airfields They mapped jet bases, approach routes, and typical return paths with uncanny accuracy. Tempests never fought fair. They waited in silence, ambushed from below, fired short bursts, and vanished. To German jet pilots, the Tempest squadrons, especially those with Canadian crews, became a psychological threat. They were the shadow waiting at the runway. 6. A jet pilot's nightmare. In post-war interviews, Me-262 pilots consistently identified Tempests as the aircraft they feared most, even more than Mustangs. One jet pilot described the Canadians bluntly. They attacked with the speed of a jet and the patience of a sniper. Another said, "When I saw a Tempest near the airfield, I knew I would not live to see the next morning." This wasn't exaggeration. By April 1945, Tempest squadrons had shot down or destroyed on the ground more than 20 Me-262s. A staggering number considering the jet's technological advantage, and Canadians were at the heart of it. 7. The end of the jet dream. By the time Germany surrendered, the Me-262 had failed to change the war. Technical issues, fuel shortages, and tactical disadvantages crippled it. But another factor played a quiet role. The complete loss of confidence caused by Canadian Tempest squadrons. A weapon is only as effective as the pilot's faith in it. And after Mayen, after the Rhine, and after the ambushes at jet airfields, that faith evaporated. The miracle jet became just another target. When people speak about strategic bombing in World War II, they usually imagine American B-7s silhouetted against the sun or the RAF's night raids over the Ruhr. But there is a lesser known force, quiet, disciplined, relentless, that Germany feared just as much and sometimes even more. 6. Group RCAF. Canada's own bomber group. They did not fly with Hollywood glamour. They did not celebrate their missions with fanfare. But when German radar operators saw a particular pattern on their screens, tight, disciplined formations at night, moving like a single organism, they would mutter among themselves, "Canada." The Canadians were coming. And that meant only one thing. Someone on the ground would not survive until morning. 1. The creation of a silent giant. In January 1943, Bomber Command reorganized and created a new unit composed entirely of Canadian squadrons. Number 6 Group RCAF, headquartered at Allerton Castle in Yorkshire. Few realized what Britain had just unleashed. 6 Group would become the third largest bomber group in Bomber Command, the most rapidly improving, the most aggressive in night operations, one of the most feared by German night fighter crews. Canada poured manpower into it. Pilots, navigators, bomb aimers, wireless operators, gunners, ground crews. Tens of thousands of young men, farm boys, mechanics, miners, found themselves flying massive machines like Halifax, Wellington, Lancaster, and unlike other Allied units that needed time to adapt, 6 Group reached combat effectiveness with surprising speed. The Luftwaffe took notice. 2. Why Germany feared Canadian bombing raids. It wasn't the size of 6 Group that terrified German defenders. It was the way they flew. German radar plots and night fighter analysts repeatedly commented on 3 terrifying traits. Their formations were unnervingly disciplined. Even under anti-aircraft fire, even in bad weather, Canadian bomber streams held formation better than average. This made it harder for German night fighters to isolate individual aircraft. They refused to break off a target. If 6 Group was assigned Laberussen, Essen or Handover, they went in regardless of flak intensity. They pushed deeper and longer inside Germany than many other Commonwealth squadrons. Their bombing accuracy rose at a shocking rate. By late 1944, Canadian bomb aimers had become among the most reliable in bomber command. Pathfinder squadrons depended heavily on Canadian data to refine their markers. One Luftwaffe officer later admitted, "We always knew when the Canadians had been over a city. The destruction was consistent, precise." 3. The nights Germany couldn't sleep. By 1944, German civilians and soldiers alike became familiar with the sound of night bombers. Distant hum, a low vibration, then the roar of destruction. But Canadian raids felt different. The rhythm of terror. 6th Group often flew later than other bomber command units. German cities would brace for an attack, survive the worst, and then an hour later, another wave approached. This second wave was often Canadian. The relentless pattern. Cities like Berlin, Cologne, Hamburg, Mannheim, Duisburg reported that Canadian raids came with a terrifying consistency. German diaries spoke of stubborn bombers who return even when the sky burns. 4. The battle in the dark. Night fighters versus Canadians. German night fighter aces like Heinz, Wolfgang, Schnofer noticed a peculiar challenge. Canadian gunners reacted faster. They didn't panic. They didn't fire wildly. They waited, cold, focused, and unleashed short, lethal bursts when the enemy came too close. German pilots described RCAF gunners as calm as machines. More than one lift buffer pilot noted something unnerving. Their tracers came from nowhere. Then one of our fighters burned. 5. The missions that broke German morale. 3 operations stand out as symbols of 6 Group's rising reputation. The Leverkusen Raid 1943. German radar noted the Canadian formation kept cohesion even while flying through intense cloud and flak. A feat labeled exceptional. Hamburg Operation Gamora, 1943. Canadian Halifaxes struck industrial zones with such precision that German firefighting units believed they were targeted by elite forces. Berlin Raids 1944. Canadians were often chosen for the most dangerous legs, including deep penetrations through heavily defended air corridors. Each mission left a psychological scar. Not because 6th Group bragged, but because they were predictable in the worst way. They always hit their target. They always came back and they always returned tomorrow. 6. The quiet nightmare. Unlike fighter aces, bomber crews rarely became legends. Their victories weren't counted in kills, but in missions completed. They lived and died anonymously, dozens at a time. But Germany feared them because behind every Canadian bomber was something the Luftwaffe could never defeat. Discipline, determination, methodical precision, and the willingness to fly into the dark again and again until the war ended. This is why 6th Group RCAF became known not as heroes of the sky but as a quiet, inevitable force of destruction. The nightmare that came at night. Fear in war is not always about numbers, technology, or firepower. Sometimes it comes from something harder to measure, a pattern, a feeling, a reputation carved into the memories of those who survived. By 1944, Luftwaffe pilots did not fear the largest Allied air force. They did not fear the richest nor the oldest. They feared the one that fought differently. They feared the Canadians. 1. They attack like they're already dead. German pilots developed a strange perception of Canadian squadrons that they were willing to risk more, fly lower, dive harder, and press an attack long after others would have broken off. This was not true, of course. Canadians wanted to live as much as anyone, but the effect was real. To the Germans, Canadian pilots felt like men who didn't hesitate, didn't second guess us, didn't Fear returned fire. Didn't abandon a strike even in deadly flak. One Luftwaffe interrogation report from 1945 included a single chilling line. The Canadians fight as though the outcome is already accepted. It was the closest thing to respect and fear that an enemy could express. 2. British precision versus American power versus Canadian aggression. To understand why Germany developed a particular fear of Canada, we must examine how the three nations fought in World War II. The British were methodical, professional, and calm. German pilots respected them deeply but knew their predictable patterns. The Americans relied on massive numbers, high-altitude formations, overwhelming firepower, and advanced technology. Dangerous, yes, but ultimately predictable. The Canadians were a hybrid of both, with something extra. Three traits made them uniquely feared: British-style discipline. Canadian pilots flew tight formations and executed tactics with textbook precision. American-style confidence. They were not intimidated by Luftwaffe veterans, even early in the war, and a distinctly Canadian instinct for initiative. They acted first, reacted fast, and trusted their own judgment in ways that unnerved their opponents. To the Germans, this combination was lethal. The fourth factor was the fear of the unpredictable. Luftwaffe pilots could anticipate how British units would respond to threats and how American formations would behave under pressure. But Canadians were the wild card. They might dive into a superior force, pursue a damaged fighter deep into German airspace, change altitude aggressively, extend a dogfight well beyond safe limits, or split formation to secure a kill. German combat diaries describe Canadians as fast, aggressive, and unwilling to disengage. Psychologically, unpredictability is far more terrifying than sheer power. Fifth, the reputation built by individuals added to the aura. Certain Canadian pilots became almost mythical among German ranks: George Buzz Burling over Malta, Johnny Armstrong over Normandy, Buzz Bawash on the Western Front, and Tempest pilots hunting Me-262 jets. Even when Germans did not know their names, they recognized the style. After-action reports often ended with "likely Canadians." It taught an entire generation of Luftwaffe flyers to associate the maple leaf with trouble. The sixth factor was the psychological breaking point. By 1945, the Luftwaffe was fighting a losing war. Fuel was scarce, engines failing, and morale collapsing. Canadian pilots delivered the final blow to German confidence. Their raids were consistent, their ambushes sudden, and their attacks ruthless. A German night fighter pilot summarized it perfectly after capture: "When we fought the British, we fought professionals. When we fought the Americans, we fought giants. When we fought the Canadians, we fought hunters." Canadians were feared not for fear itself, but because every time they appeared, something important died. In the grand scale of World War II, Canada was never expected to be a decisive air power, not according to German intelligence, not according to Hitler, not according to pre-war Luftwaffe assessments. To Germany, Canada was a sparsely populated dominion with a small pre-war air force, limited industry, few aircraft, and no strategic ambitions. Yet this minor country became one of the Luftwaffe's most unexpected nightmares. To understand why, we must revisit the key assumptions Germany made and see how each was shattered in the skies. First, Germany believed Canada would send only foot soldiers. Early German analysts assumed Canada would repeat its World War I role: provide manpower but not a highly skilled air force. They thought Britain would supply pilots, America numbers, and Canada ground troops. The Luftwaffe never anticipated that Canada would create one of the largest pilot training machines in human history, the CAP. Tens of thousands of aircrew arrived annually, trained in the vast, wild spaces of North America. Second, Germany misjudged the Canadian mindset. Luftwaffe doctrine emphasized technical flying excellence, aerobatics, precision maneuvers, and strict formation discipline. Canada produced something different: instinctive hunters, men accustomed to risk, trained with rifles, and taught to trust their judgment. Canadians attacked first and asked questions later. A German evaluation in 1944 noted bluntly, "The Canadians do not react like other pilots. They act." And in air combat, decisive, immediate, unhesitating action is more deadly than perfection. Third, Germany underestimated the training program that changed the war. The CAT was the most underestimated development of the entire air war. German intelligence dismissed it, believing Canada lacked the factories to sustain large-scale training. They were wrong. Canada trained more aircrew than Britain, more than the United States before 1943, and more navigators, bomb aimers, and gunners than any other Commonwealth nation. By 1944, Canada produced skilled pilots at a rate the Luftwaffe could not match, especially after losing veterans on the Eastern Front. For every Luftwaffe ace shot down, Canada had 10 new pilots ready to replace him. Fourth, Germany misread the operational evolution of RCAF units. Luftwaffe analysts expected Canadian squadrons to be inexperienced or slow to adapt. Instead, RCAF units evolved faster than anticipated. In Malta, Berling rewrote the book on instinctive dogfighting. In Normandy, Canadian Spitfires mauled German formations threatening the beachhead. In the Ardennes, ambushes stunned German air command. In 1945, Tempest squadrons turned Me-262 runways into killing grounds. 6 group bomber crews devastated German industrial centers at night. Every time Germany thought it understood the Canadians, Canada reinvented its role. This unpredictability created profound psychological fear. Fifth, Germany learned too late that Canada was a force multiplier. Canada was never the largest, the richest, or the most technologically advanced, but it was scalable. A single Canadian squadron could make any RAF or USAAF operation far more dangerous for Germany. Their pilots strengthened Allied morale, bomber streams reinforced night raids, Tempests filled gaps in air superiority, and Spitfires executed aggressiveness Britain often lacked. Their discipline complemented American firepower. Canada became the missing piece that completed the Allied air equation, a reality Germany recognized only after thousands of Luftwaffe aircraft were burning across Europe. Finally, the truth Germany never expected: fear of Canada was not numerical, it was cultural. Canada fought with British precision, American boldness, and a uniquely Canadian ferocity born of a hard land and harsh upbringing. The Luftwaffe never prepared for such a combination. Germany's greatest mistake was not underestimating Allied numbers, American factories, or British radar. It was underestimating a quiet country that transformed its wilderness sons into some of the deadliest pilots of the war. When Canadians took to the sky, Germany learned a final painful truth: small nations can cast long shadows, especially when their pilots fly straight into the sun.